The next witness will be introduced by Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Soon, actually weeks after I came to Congress, I had a meeting in my district office in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, and the woman that I met with described her entrepreneurial aspirations and really a unique and innovative startup company she created. And while our company was growing, there was an unfortunate setback that had her doubting the future of her business. It was brought to my attention that the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, which passed unanimously in the 110th Congress as a result of lead contaminants in children's toy, had unintended regulatory consequences that placed undue restraints on everything from the product development to expansion. And my constituent went on to explain that if the materials she used to make her products were not tested by a third-party laboratory, she could be in violation of the law, and this testing would have grave financial ramifications on her product line. And this seems to be counterproductive, mainly because her source material were purchased from retail outlets that already are certified the goods. And my constituent explained as a mother, she wanted our children to be safe, and she did everything to ensure that with her business. And I'm certainly confused as to how this law and in turn regulations set into place by the Consumer Product Safety Commission could place such a burden and disincentive on a budding entrepreneur. And Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate your assistance in having Suzi Lang, owner of Starbright baby teething giraffes, join us today. One of my constituents, Suzi Lang, is a former kindergarten through 12th grade art teacher, also trained as a graphic designer and photographer, and she produces these stuffed teething and toddler giraffes that are sold online and wholesale to baby boutiques in both the United States and Canada. And welcome, Mrs. Lang, and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you very much for having me here today. As the mother of a 2-year-old, I admire Congress's efforts to draft a law that protects children from excessive amounts of lead in toys. Unfortunately, the law as it is currently written will heavily damage small businesses and entrepreneurs who make and sell items for children in this country. I do not believe the law is fatally flawed. However, I think the injection of some common sense provisions would more effectively ensure safe products for children and prevent irreparable damage to small business. The reason that I'm giving my testimony is because that I, along with several business owners, are afraid for what the CPSIA means for our business and the important amount of income it brings into our families. Specifically, my business consists of fabricating and selling these soft little teething giraffes for babies. I'm not affiliated with any groups. I'm here on behalf of my own business. However, I'm using the resources that I have to advocate for our small businesses, many of whom rely on this income to sustain their families. A few of the major problems that this law presents to my business are unit testing, the tracking and labeling requirement, and the fallacy of assuming that everything is toxic until proven safe. Unit testing is cost prohibitive for many small businesses, including my own. I make very small batches of these giraffes, usually about 10 per fabric choice. I also make one-of-a-kind and custom items for my customers using their own fabric or fabric from my collection. My giraffes would be required by this law as of February 10th, 2010 to be tested for both lead and phthalates. I contacted a lab close to my home in Harrisburg to quote for lead and phthalate testing. For the lead testing, I was quoted $50 per component. And for each giraffe, there are 4 to 5 components. Cumulatively, the total cost for testing one fabric line of giraffes would be anywhere from $1,800 to $2,200. That's also adding in the $400 per component for the phthalate testing. My giraffes usually sell for about $14 to $18 each, depending on the kind of fabric that I use. And the added cost of testing would add an additional $180 to $225 per giraffe. For a one-of-a-kind item, the price would have an additional $1,800 to $2,200 price tag tacked on to a $14 charge. This is extremely cost prohibitive for my customers. Considering that the law specifies that if I change any component, it would need to be tested again, I create 36 different patterns of giraffes in 2008. So the total cost of lead and phthalate testing would be $64,000 to $81,000. I actually only made $4,500 gross last year. The deficit the testing would create would more than put me out of business. It would bankrupt my family. Another aspect of the law that affects my business is the tracking and labeling. The law says that it is to be, to the extent practicable, But I question how this could be done by any home craft seller or small business. Each lot needs a new tag, and it would force me to have to make my own labels because I would never be able to meet the minimums for the label companies that I use to print the labels that I have now. Because my giraffes are only 10 or fewer, or sometimes a one-off, it would never be practical. But the most disheartening thing for me as a small business is the assumption that the law is everything bad and dangerous until proven safe, especially since many of the materials I use are proven to have no phthalates, no lead. Fabric is all I'm using, quilting fabric, cotton fabric. Many small businesses do not purchase their fabric wholesale, but instead buy from local fabric or quilting shops. In this setting, I can buy 1 yard of fabric from my local shop, make my giraffes, have to have them all lead and phthalate testing, and my neighbor can go buy the very next yard off the bolt of fabric, make baby bibs, try to sell them, and she would also have to lead and phthalate test the very same fabric from this very same bolt, which is pretty much nonsense. The most problematic thing for me is to have to phthalate test this item. Since it's a teething item, it's required under the law to be phthalate tested, but it's entirely made out of cotton fabric. When I contacted the lab to get quotes, they asked me how they would have to be able to do this, since the CPSC said to grind the toy to get a sample to test. But there's no grinding on a fabric giraffe. I don't think he would survive. There are so many unintended consequences of this law that thousands of small businesses and crafters will be put out of business in this already tough economic climate. Thank you very much.